thanks a lot for coming, and I'm glad to be back here. It's been maybe a year and a half or so since I was here before, and this time it's especially fun for me because I've got musicians to play with before. I know I did the thing with the tape, and anyway, Jeff Sipe was on drums. It was the first time we played together. I'm a big fan of his for a long time, and really glad to be able to play with him today. And Paul Taylor, a good friend of mine, on bass. Plays with me in my normal band in Memphis called DDT. And so we were just jamming on a couple songs that actually will be out on a record. Actually, it's already out. It's been out about 2 weeks, and it's called, recorded it with Jonas Hellborg on bass, and a guy named Kofi Baker on drums, who's the son of Ginger Baker, and a really good drummer, real unusual drummer, and it's just a trio record. Jonas Hellborg, Abstract Logic is the name of it, and these songs were from that record, although in a different version. So now we can talk about some things. I can't really see because of the stage lights. Well, we can just start right in with some questions. I know that will lead to some other topics. Anybody has some particular questions about the types of things we've been playing, the musical influences? There's some things I can...
I got a question.
Yeah?
What kind of battery do you use?
Battery?
Yeah. Duracell?
I think they're like Kmart. Yeah. Cheap.
What you're doing is really great.
Thanks.
Well, like I noticed that you're playing a lot of like static, kind of like drone, and I've noticed also that you got a lot of kind of like a Middle Eastern kind of flavor to it, and like John Coltrane, like later on, after his band kind of left, and he started getting into the avant-garde, and he started doing a lot of that real long kind of 19 minutes of just going on and on. Do you kind of feel the same way in that you kind of feel very free playing over the drone? You just feel it's almost like you're trying to, I don't know, it's really stretching it, kind of, it's just freedom.
I agree, and I really do enjoy it for that reason, and that's good for you to notice that. But yes, the songs that we were playing do have a pronounced kind of Eastern, Indian, Pakistani influence, especially the kinds of the things that I was singing with the keyboard. And the keyboard patch was kind of an imitation harmonium patch. Harmonium is like it's almost like an accordion, but it sits down on the ground, and you play it, and you pump it while you play it. You play it with one hand and pump it with the other, and it has drones on it too that kind of drone while you're pumping it. In the case of this, which is kind of a synthesized harmonium, I'm kind of holding the drone with one hand. But it's true, in the last probably 6 to 8 months, I've been more influenced by the music from Pakistan particularly, and India also, than any other thing probably in my musical life. And I've been into Indian music for probably 15 years or so, but and I was familiar with a lot of the greatest players. L. Shankar on violin, I've been a big fan of for a long time, and L. Subramaniam, his brother, is a great, even maybe better violinist. And I, of course, like John McLaughlin, Shaq T, he was one of the first guitarists to really bring that music, to really meet it on its own terms and not just kind of westernize it, but incorporate a lot of the rhythmic variation elements of it. Because actually it's very similar to jazz and classical music. Indian music is very similar in a lot of elements to classical and jazz. In that, say in jazz, in Pakistani or Indian music, you have like different rags that are like, it's not really like a scale, it's more like a tone row perhaps than a scale, but you can call it a scale. And actually in India they're called thats, which is the smaller, kind of the mini rag, which is just the scales. And oftentimes the rags will be different going up and down. And that's similar in a lot of ways to Western contemporary music, 20th century music, Arnold Schoenberg, Webern, and Berg, which is the 12-tone serial music. Because if you look at what they're doing, the only difference in the 12-tone classical music is that each of the 12 notes of the scale has to be played before you can start over again. Okay, but once you have this row established, what they do is they turn it upside down or retrograde or inversion, all these different things. And if you analyze Indian music, it's the same thing. They take the rag and just melodically, if you just forget the rhythmic thing for a minute, melodically they do the same thing. They'll play it in different orders and every other note and backwards, retrograde. It's the same types of techniques. And also in Indian music is a very strong improvisational element that's really similar to jazz in a way. If you look at the way that the rags are structured and how they build and versus jazz solos, and I think Coltrane was one of the first in jazz to really see that strong connection. And so that's been a really big influence for me. And also, I think after a number of years of so many years of studying and enjoying Western music, just recently some of the types of ornamentations that's done in Indian music. I could probably demonstrate. Well, it's not. The guitar's not ready yet. Actually, there's a guy. I'm working a little bit on this technique. There's this guy named U. Srinivas that plays South Indian music on a mandolin, an electric mandolin with frets. And the way he does a lot of the ornamentation is with slides. Let me see if I can demonstrate that. But it's similar to that, and he's been a big inspiration for me. And then the other thing that really kind of changed my life in the last few months was hearing this singer from Pakistan named Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, who records records for Real World labels, Peter Gabriel's label. And actually those records are good, but he has 2 records on JVC, World Sounds, that are the best Qawwali records ever. Qawwali is this style of, it means wandering minstrel in Pakistani, and it was this style of music that's like, it's almost like a Sufi Muslim Pentecostal church service in a way, the way they sing. Each song lasts like 30 minutes long, and it's just really spiritual music, and the singing and playing has just been a giant influence on me. And then after that I got into him, I got into a guy that totally has blown my mind, and it's been, when I heard him, and I'm speaking of Salamat, Ustad Salamat Ali Khan, and when I heard him, it's all the years that I'd liked Indian music and really loved it, but still something was missing to keep it from just totally grabbing me. But this year when I heard Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan and Salamat, and I would urge you, if any of you are interested in Eastern or Indian music at all, get any records by Nusrat, or particularly Salamat Ali Khan, because it's just the most amazing vocal style I've ever heard. And it's a little bit similar to what I'm singing, but much more advanced intervallically. I'm just kind of starting on this style, and I just enjoy doing it. But and also, I could say one other thing about the late Train records, was Live at the Village Vanguard again, and what's the one with Peace? I think it was live in Japan. I think the person that was, another big influence I could mention on Coltrane, for any of you interested, and I'm sure you've probably heard the book or seen it here, is Nicholas Slonimsky's Thesaurus of Scales. That was the book that Coltrane went through and learned all the scales from that. And it's great. It's a great book because it's not the normal music theory types of scales. It's based on this new system, or it knew at the time, it was like 1938, 1940 when this came out, of dividing the octave into 2 tritones. And so instead of anything being called thirds, fourths, sixths and stuff, it's called Latin names like sesquitone, sesquiquinquitone, diatessaron, all these different scales. So have you guys heard of that? Nicholas Slonimsky's Thesaurus of Scales? That is just, it's like 1,000 pages. It's like every possible combination of notes in the world. And also has many chordal structures. And Slonimsky's attitude in writing the thing was, he put all these things together, different chord progressions, different types of chords, different scales that are more almost like melodies than scales, and different palindromic canons. It was very interesting. Palindromes is like madam, I'm Adam backwards. It's the same backwards or forward. And there's a lot of palindromic canonical things you can do. And Slonimsky says in the book, just take anything from here. This whole book is just tools for composers. So that if you're looking for ideas in music, try to find a copy of it. It's out of print, but you might could find it at a library, and copy things from that, because that's what it's for. It was a book of tools of different types of note combinations for use by composers. So it's not like you're ripping him off or anything. That's what the purpose of it was for. It is in print now. Great. Well, it was out for a long time. And it has the grandmother chord in it, invented by Nicholas Slanimsky, February 13th, 1938, where he has all 12 tones and 11 symmetrically invertible intervals, or something crazy like that.
What's the name of that book?
Slanimsky's Thesaurus of Scales and Melodic Patterns.
That is good for you.
You do have it?
Yeah, we do.
All right.
The bootleg version was big copy, but it's in there.
That's what I've got too, is a bootleg.
Many days to copy that thing.
He said.
So, other types of things about.
I had a question for you on your first song. When you played the other Ibanez, I noticed you played a lot and picked a lot with the bar in your hand. Do you have it lowered down any at all, the angle, to have it rest in your hand easier while you're picking, or is it just a standard bar?
Let me get it, and I'll see what's going on here. It is a little lower than a normal bar because the tailpiece is floating and it goes back quite a ways. It's the Wizard of Oz interval. But it goes back a long way. And so because of that, it is down. And yeah, over the years, I just developed this style where I kind of keep it in my hand, even if I'm not using it that much. And then I'll use it just very slightly a lot of times, almost. And it's gotten to where it's kind of subconscious for me, like... something like that. And a lot of times I use it where... it's not real obvious it's a bar if you were just listening to it. Sometimes it is obvious it's a bar and other things, but if I'm doing what I intend to do sometimes, it's like playing where it's just like the vibrato is going down and up, you know, instead of if you're just doing it with your fingers, most of the time you're caught with just going up in pitch. And that's why I think that the one like Chuck Berry position lick is the most popular guitar lick. And the reason I believe that is because when you're bending up to here, you're playing this note and then vibratoing down, which is more like a vocal sound. And then when you play other notes, you're vibratoing up in pitch. So I kind of wanted to get the quality that this note has on other notes, you know, and, to get a little more vocal quality. But let me see if there's any other thing I can add about that. I think what it is, what it amounts to really is that the bar is allowed to pretty much jump around wherever it wants to, and the fingers are just kind of there, almost just catching it as it bounces. And in that way, if you were gripping it tight, it would throw your picking off because the angles here would all of a sudden be here, and it wouldn't work. So I think that's the key, is to pick and then let it dangle, and then just have your fingers here just to catch it as it moves up and down. And that's the way I apply it. Some more questions? Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to know about your composition. Compose. Are you aiming, like when you listen to any music, you hear something in it, you compose. Do you try to aim for the same kind of feeling, or do you try and utilize certain scales or techniques? Because you seem to be versed well as far as technique. and a scientific understanding of what you're doing, but you seem to aim more towards something that is ethereal.
Yeah.
So, from which angle do you tend to come? What are you trying to go?
I think definitely more of just the feeling of it and trying to get the emotion and the passion across. And I think the thing, again, that made this click for me, make sense to me in my own head, was a discovering of the Pakistani music, because it's a little different from Indian music. Indian music is always over a set drone. But in Pakistan, it has the elements of Indian music, the same types of ornamentations, but they actually change chords a lot behind what the vocals are singing. And when I heard that, the combination of those chord changes, and in Pakistani music, there's a lot of passion and feeling, a real kind of ecstatic type of feeling almost, and that made it click for me. But I go mostly by feeling, and I can demonstrate just a couple things of what I was talking about with the Indian music. Let me get the keyboard. This is like the harmonium. So let me explain a little bit about just a kind of a thumbnail sketch of maybe some of the concept that I was talking about there. Let me see. This is a rag. I believe it's called Rag Mag. That's a type of a rag on a Salamat Ali Khan record. And this particular thing is just 5 notes. So the whole thing is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the whole rag, in this case, just consists of these 5 notes. And they go on for like 30 minutes on these notes, because there's a million different ways you can combine them and sing them in different ways. So let me demonstrate. So that's all just these same notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and then there's another rod just to show you the difference, just that one note in this kind of thing can make. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This other rod, which I believe I'm not sure what it's called. It's a Bhairav hyphen something else. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In this case, it's just one note different. Instead of this, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I deviated a little bit there at the end, which is more like characteristic of the Pakistani style. So like in Indian music, they'll keep just to these notes the whole time, and vary them in just endless ways. But then when I did this, that implies applied a kind of a modulation that wouldn't be in Indian music, but you would find in Pakistani music. So that's just a kind of a thumbnail sketch of how they take these just rows of notes, sometimes just 5 notes, in these 2 examples, and you can have such a totally different feeling. And the other thing that I can say in what I do and how it relates again to the music of the West and of the East is rhythmically, a lot of the way that I play on guitar is based on different combinations of rhythmic coordination. So I do things like, say, a rhythmic coordination of a 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Yes.
Describe a little bit how you practice and get when you're picking over the strings, you're going across all of them real fast. How you practice?
I would say that the thing to remember about that, there's a couple different things. In my case, it's the angle of the pick. I play with the pick at a pretty severe angle. It's almost sideways, almost totally sideways. And I don't always play that way. But when I'm doing a lot of faster picking things, it's pretty much always almost totally sideways. So one thing is the angle of the pick, and then the other thing is the kind of the focus of the movement. If I'm doing it really fast, it's because it's almost like a focusing and a squeezing sensation. It's like a phonograph needle. You just try to focus the energy into such a small space that you can, especially when moving around. But what I was going to say that may shed some light on that relates back to what I was saying about the Indian music is the way they relate to music, which seems to me a way that makes sense, is through there's different syllables in the North and South. In the South, it's like, what is it? They have a different syllable for each added number of the rhythm. So takadimi, 1, 2, 3, 4. So they would say like takadimi, which would be 4s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Takadimi, takadimi, takadimi. And then like 5s would be takadimi ta, takadimi ta, takadimi. I think I may be wrong. Taki to takadimi. Is that one? Taki to taki, taki to taki. Right, and like takadimi chudika, what is that?
I don't know.
That's like 7. Takadimi chudika, takadimi chudika, or daddy gadadu, daddy gadadu, daddy gadadu, daddy. How does that one?
I like the blacker the cherry, the sweeter the juice.
That is a good one. And in any case, what you end up is that the people that play the pitch instruments know the rhythms of the tabla and mridangam players. And a lot of times those people will know all the melodies too. They both learn that. And that relates to my guitar playing, in that a lot of what I play is just different combinations of those rhythms. So like, say I might do 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and mix it with 5s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. And then I kind of went to straight 6s there. So, okay, anyway. You had a question?
Yeah, do they have any sort of set bar system? Like we have 12-bar blues in the West. 1, 4, 5. What are some of the chord progressions?
There's really not any, not in Indian. It's pretty much all drone. In Pakistani music, they have some chord progressions. A lot of them are just really basic chord progressions. There's nothing that unusual. They use strange melody notes over top of it, and sometimes strange inversions. Like there's a piece where they're in this key. And they go. well, anyway, a lot of it is kind of polytonal and polyrhythmic too, which is appeals to me in a lot of ways. But
Do they ever use any more than 5 notes?
yeah, some rags, you know, I mean the general standardized scale is usually 7 notes, but some rags can have many notes and different ways of ascending and descending. But the thing I think probably to get into that realm of music is to try to find some really great records of it, because there are a lot of records that are more kind of pedantic or strictly technical. They don't have as much passion in them, and they might be kind of off-putting, and it might all sound like it's just all the same and droning. And it's funny, but say if you were a person that hadn't heard much of it, and there's 10 records out there on the shelves, there might be 8 of them that would be boring to you in such a way that you would listen to it and give up on the music. But if you caught that one certain record, it might speak to you in a certain way, so that it would make sense to you. And so I would be careful in getting, again, Nusrat, Salamat, who are some great people, Ali Akbar Khan. Make sure it's some of the greatest people, the stuff that you listen to, because some of the other stuff in that realm could be boring or maybe off-putting in some ways. Any questions about maybe gear or some of the stuff I've got going here?
Speak real briefly on your musical history. Was there something that you heard as a kid, as a God, I gotta play an instrument, and what came first, the keyboard or the guitar? Was there a certain look that said, God, I gotta play guitar?
Let me see. I used to love music a lot when I was 3 and 4 or 5 years old. I would listen to the radio and kind of showed an aptitude, I think, for music. But it was my grandmother that first, it was really her idea to get me a guitar. I was probably 7 or 8 years old, maybe. And so for probably between the time I was like 6 and 12, I never thought about the instrument technically much. At that time, you know, 73, 72, there wasn't really a wealth of instructional materials out. There was just a couple books, there was no videos, none of that kind of thing at all. So, and I really didn't get into it and jump right into that. I mostly just played a lot of songs and played in a lot of bands. When I was about 12, I started playing in local rock bands. And really didn't think about guitar technique or even lead guitar or anything. I just kind of played what I felt, and it was okay. But I guess when I was about 13, 14, I heard classical music for the first time in such a way to really listen to it. I'm sure I'd heard it as kind of background music. But I heard a record, 2 different records, one record of Bach Goldberg variations performed by Anthony Newman on harpsichord, and then Vladimir Horowitz playing a Moskowski etude on the piano. And when I heard those pieces, it clicked for me, and that was my first, the first records that I loved and what got me into classical music around the time I was 13, 14. And then also when I was 14, I saw Alan Holdsworth play live in 1978. And at that time, I was playing just strictly a pretty basic style of guitar, you know, maybe at I guess 13. The leap for me was when I saw Holdsworth when I was, I guess, 14, 1978, and I was like right on the front row. I didn't even know who he was. I went to the concert just because it was $1.03. And it wasn't any, I didn't know who UK was or Alan Holdsworth or anything. And I was like sitting on the front row, and it just totally boggled my mind and kind of changed my whole life in some ways. And I continue to love Alan Holdsworth very much. He's a great person and a great artist. And so he was a big influence on me. And then the third major thing was, then, when I was 14, I got with Black Oak, Arkansas in 1978 and played probably about 4 years with them in like stadiums and coliseums and all these big gigs, which for a kid at my age, it was kind of a weird trip, you know. And I don't know that I would let my 14-year-old kid go out on the road with these guys, you know. And my parents were really lenient about it. I kind of thank them now in a way because of the experience I had, but I don't know. And so I did that for a few years, and toward the last couple of years of Black Oak, we got a keyboard player that was really well versed in classical and played some Liszt and Rachmaninoff. And when I saw him play it sitting there in front of me, it made it make even more sense. Instead of it seeming like something in a museum or something that is old or whatever, when I saw a guy really play it live, it totally changed the way I thought about things. So those were the biggest influences at that time. And ever since then, I think, and then I kind of went into maybe a practicing phase somewhat on the guitar and worked out most of the technique that I have today between the ages of about 14 and 17. And ever since then, I'm 17, I haven't really worked on guitar techniques per se, but I'm always studying music, different types of music, different ways of playing. And in the meantime, I also learned drums and bass and keyboards. And I've been playing keyboards, I guess, about 12 years. And then started trying to figure out how to play all the instruments on my own records. Because in the area that I was in Memphis, especially back then, there was very few people, and remains very few people, into kind of progressive instrumental music there. So I didn't really have a choice. If I wanted to do it, I kind of had to learn to play all the instruments myself to be my own band on my tapes.
Do you like any rock-oriented music?
Very much, yeah, very much. That's what I grew up on. And as far as in rock guitar, one of the biggest people for me was Billy Gibbons, and still is. The records Fandango and Rio Grande Mud and Tres Hombres are just the epitome, I think, of guitar. And you might can hear it a little bit, and when I play, I can demonstrate a little bit of how that influences me. The thing about Gibbons I always liked was the way he did this kind of vibrato on the D string. And most of the strings in the guitar won't do it. It's just the D string. And if you do, the D string right, and if you vibrato it a certain way, it sounds like there's something in the frequencies going a little bit, and you can't always get it, but that's what I'm talking about, that D vibrato. Sometimes Gibbons would actually pull the note off the fretboard. What's that one? Another thing that appealed to me, particularly about him, that's influenced me, is the way he vibrato chords, like I was just doing there in Brown Sugar, or like in Beer Drinkers and Hellraisers. That's one where he pulls the note off the neck. So he was a big influence on me. And I always really liked guitar to where there was a certain character to the notes. There was a certain thing in the vibrato, but the vibrato alone, that's just kind of maybe a little bit too broad a way to describe it. It's not just when people say this guy's got good vibrato or this guy doesn't have good vibrato. To me, that's kind of an overgeneralization, because a lot of these things that give the playing character could fall under the general category of vibrato, but are really more like note shaping. It's like how do you articulate each different note? And with that kind of playing particularly, so just doing something like that, if you were going, well, the subtlety would be you'd go. So if the first time you played this note, you're bending it up, not really a quarter tone, maybe an eighth tone. And then another eighth tone, and then maybe play this note, and then slide up to this note, and vibrato it kind of slowly at first, but then increase the speed after that. So it, you can break down just a phrase that simple, just and you can find all these different note shaping elements in that. And so I try to maintain that kind of playing and touch in simple and in complicated terms. So, and that kind of goes back to what I believe about technique and what's considered technique. Again, there's kind of a general misconception, I believe, about technique. And a lot of times it's referred to mainly as scales and the ability to play scales fast and things like that. And people will say things like Hendrix was a soulful player and say Yngwie is a technical player or something like that. And it's just ridiculous because Hendrix had some of the most unbelievable technique. If, again, in a similar fashion as what I was talking about there, if you break down any few bars of what he's talking about, you're going to hear, there might be a whole tone bend and then an eighth note bend, and then he may do the vibrato, start on a fast vibrato and gradually slow it down and then get one more bend in, It's how close you want to relatively analyze these things. And in a player such as that, I believe it's highly technical. In his case, he has some of the greatest abilities to shape the different notes with little subtle things. So I believe that's, and one of the things I struggle with the most on guitar is to really just to try to play in tune, because the guitar is just a pretty hard instrument just to even make the notes in tune. And that's, again, to go back to the Indian music briefly, is that because they don't modulate, it's all in one key. There doesn't have to be any tempered system. It's all a pure scale. And there's something about hearing in Indian music. You have these pure thirds that just grab you. And in the West, in our normal well-tempered system for piano, the thirds and the other intervals are slightly off. To the beat system, they're tuned out a little bit so that you can play in all the different keys. But in listening to the Eastern music, it so increases my pitch sensitivity. And so when I do listen back to maybe things I play, the thing that'll cause me most to like gag or whatever is if I hear a note that's not the note that I intended. Maybe it's off an eighth tone or things like that. And I probably didn't used to hear that way, but the older I get and the longer I play, the more sensitive I'm getting to be able to hear a half step or a quarter step or even an eighth tone.
Could you play some more?
Play? Yeah, we're gonna do a few more songs, so I don't know what we're gonna do for time or something, but I can answer a few more questions before we do that. No, I don't. I love to listen to it. I think it requires some really hairy calluses, and I don't even have calluses from guitar, so I would be hopeless.
What kind of chord do you use to harmonize those strings?
Excuse me?
What kind of chord you use to harmonize those strings?
Those what? I'm sorry.
He wants to know what kind of board you use.
What kind of? I
Foot
still don't.
pedal. What kind of foot pedal do you use
Foot
to
pedal.
run everything there?
No. Chords. Okay. Well, the thing is actually, if you're talking about again the Indian music, there wouldn't be any chords to it, but I can show it very quickly. So the difference, if they were doing Indian and they were just in this key, they would be. But if you're Pakistani, where they will change chords, they might go. Get that in Indian music because they don't modulate like that, even never ever. And so if you do want to hear those kinds of ornamentations and you want to hear it over chords, then check out the Pakistani music. But there's nothing that different about what they're doing. It's mostly just over chords. But I guess the novelty is to have the chords help over those ornaments.
I think what he's really getting at is ultimately be the soft hot tune.
Yeah, I don't really have a way to. Well,
Can you explain it though?
I could demonstrate this one thing here. Where's my pick?
On the keyboard.
Well, actually, I think I'll save that for another time. There's a tuning I have that it works well for this Eastern kind of music, but I'll save that to maybe next time.
I know you've been doing a lot of recording. Are you going to do a follow-up to Powers of 10?
Yes, I already did one. I recorded and finished a second record, and Warner Brothers rejected it. And it was all live instruments this time because with my budget for my second record, I had enough money finally to get a bunch of microphones and a drum kit and everything. So on this, I played all the instruments and it's all live. And it's a lot more rock and roll, if you ask me, than that first one, if that's what they were looking for. But yet still, they rejected it. And there was a lot of problems at Warner Brothers in the last year or so. The president changed a couple times, and they phased out divisions. And I kind of think my division has just gotten phased out. I used to be with what they call the progressive division in Nashville, which had Take Six and myself, Mark O'Connor, Bela Fleck and the Flecktones. And what's gradually happened is all those people have gone mainstream. Like Take Six went straight R&B, and Mark O'Connor is moving into country. And I don't know what Bela Fleck's done. He may not even be with the label anymore. Too much?
He was jamming on Saturday Night Live the other night.
Yeah, but so whereas the mandate for the label at first was to get people specifically because they didn't fit into one particular genre or not. Now, if you don't fit into a particular genre, then they don't want, apparently they're against it. And so they've turned it down. I may do, but they didn't drop me. It's a weird position. They were like, record another album and we'll listen to that and maybe we'll put that one out. But they're not going to give me any more money to record another record. And I have my own studio, so I can do it, but it's hard to make enough time to actually record a whole record for free, even if you do have the studio. So I'm debating as to what to do. I may record another tape of just some really, really far out stuff and send it to Warner's on purpose so that they'll turn it down, and maybe I can get a release from them based on that. But so in order to survive in the last year, which it was probably about 8 months ago that they did that. I've done a lot of work with other people. I did the record with Jonas. I'm leaving in about a week to go to Germany to do another trio record with myself, Jonas Hellborg, and Michael Shreve, who was the drummer for the old Santana band, on CMP label. So that should be out in a few months. And then, let me see. Right now I'm just doing a lot of things where I'm like guesting on other people's records, but mostly they're trio records. Actually, on this Michael Shreve record, myself and Jonas wrote all the material. Michael didn't really write any of the material. It was mostly me and Jonas. Michael had a few ideas here and there. But the thing is that when the record comes out, Michael Shreve's name will be first. It'll be a Michael Shreve record with me guesting on it. Even though like I wrote or co-wrote all the material and really play a big part in it, it's like a political thing. As long as my name's not first, I can get away with playing on anybody's record no matter how much I contribute to it and still not violate my Warner Brothers contract because I'm still under contract with them as a solo artist. Maybe, I liked Demiola a lot back like on the Elegant Gypsy and Land of the Midnight Sun, and a few of his first records I kind of liked. After that, I think he got a little stale, and so he was maybe a little influence on me, but more definitely McLaughlin. And John McLaughlin is probably the ultimate technical master of the pick. He's the greatest at that technique. So there's inevitable similarities because of Demiola's picking style, but I would think my approach is probably more influenced by McLaughlin than Demiola. Well, we can play some more music, and I guess that's what we'll do. So, give us a minute. Okay, well, I guess we're just gonna jam on one other song and take it on out. What?
Camarillo?
Yeah, I guess we're gonna do now Relaxing at Camarillo from when Bird was committed to the insane asylum. drums, apartment Q258. Paul Taylor on bass. Thanks a lot. It's good to see you all. Hope to see you again soon. Good night. Thanks for coming.